Planning and Zoning Board will come to order. It is August 24th, 6 o'clock. Would the secretary call roll, please?
Mr. Russell,
Here.
Mr. Price,
Present.
Ms. Denny. Present. Ms. Gentlecore. Present. Dr. Miller. Mr. Stroud.
Present.
Mr. Thorpe.
Okay.
Before you start, Mr. Chairman, I would like to remind everybody, it's very, very important that you speak into the mic. Please.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Okay.
I can hear you right now, but
Very
I don't
good.
know about later.
Okay.
Well, boy.
Okay, since we don't have any minutes to deal with tonight, we'll go right into the agenda. It'll be item number 1. It's consideration and recommendation of site plan approval for a drive-through accessory car wash at the Marathon Gas Station located at 8101 Astronaut Boulevard. And do we have to swear people in for this testimony tonight? If anybody wishes to speak, if you even think you might want to speak, go ahead and stand up. We'll swear you in. You don't have to speak, but you'll have it done. So if you're going to speak, we're going to swear you in, and then we'll ask you to fill out a card up here. You can do that after you say I do.
This is for the site plan application. Just raise your right hand. You turn yourself over. Good stuff we got. Thank you. Here's
Very good. Go ahead and fill out your speaker's card and put it up here so I know your name and where you're from. All right, you have the site plan in your package. I'm just going to ask David to take us through it, and then we'll entertain questions and observations afterward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, as I always indicate, it's wonderful to be here with as I like to say, one of the best boards at the city of Cape Canaveral. I can't say the best, I'd get in trouble. But
It's the best board.
well, it's certainly it's a very productive board, and it's a very important board. So thank you. As Mr. Chairman indicated, this is site plan approval for a proposed accessory car wash located at the Marathon site with an address of 8101 Astronaut Boulevard. The site is within the A1A Economic Opportunity District, as well as the property is Zone C1, which a car wash is a permitted use. That's why we're here speaking this evening, because it is allowed. This site does include an 851 square foot accessory car wash on a 0.88 acre parcel. You know this site probably better than I do, but that existing ice vending operation will be removed. That's essentially where the new structure will be located. So those of you who like to stop in there and get ice for your fishing trips will have to, I don't know, find other situation. The proposed structure is 15 feet in height. It includes a single lane drive-through. The proposed structure meets all of the dimensional requirements of the C1 and A1A overlay district. The project as designed will not increase the impervious surface of the parcel. That's a pretty, there's a lot of asphalt on that site. And so the proposed project will not increase it at all, as it's already been paved. So I don't believe a St. John's permit's going to be required, stormwater permit. The project is located in an area known as Flood Zone X, which indicates it's outside of the 100-year flood zone. There are no jurisdictional wetlands. And also, speaking of the site plan now, there is specific process that we follow for site plan approvals. We generally hold what's called a pre-application conference with the applicant, which we did. And we sit down with the applicant, and it's not just myself and my staff, it's everybody from the city, to include the fire department, the police department, our public works folks, city engineer. So we all sit down with them and kind of hopefully point out any landmines that may be waiting for them in as they proceed through the process. But this case was very straightforward, so they moved quickly. The code requires that the application include a site plan checklist, which is part of your application packet. It's included in there. I believe it's attachment 2 to your agenda cover. And the site plan checklist just makes sure that they're addressing all of the items that are required by the code. As this project is limited to the construction of an accessory drive-through, no parking spaces will be required above those that already exist on the site. So parking in this particular situation is not an issue. Due to the nature and the scope of the project, the overlay district architectural standards, and some of the other requirements as far as orientation of the building and other things were not applied to this particular project because, as I said, because it's an 850-foot accessory structure. Most of the criteria, the design criteria, are really contemplated a large primary structure, such as a hotel or a new office building. But we did apply some of the standards to include the landscaping standards. There will be new landscaping, and you can see that from your site plan packet. There is a landscaping sheet in there that indicates the area of new landscaping. And just for those of you who've not really had a chance to digest all of it, the new landscaping, there's a raised median out on the front of the property. There's, I think, 4 palm trees that sit right there. There's going to be some landscaping further enhanced in that strip. And then there's going to be some additional landscaping placed on the south side of the project. There is some open green area down there. If you know the new marathon ground sign that was put there, let's just say within the last year and a half, there'll be some really nice landscaping put down there to beautify this site a little bit, as much as we can. We've got a pretty built out site there. And so we looked for opportunities, or I looked for opportunities to get some landscaping put in there to soften it a little bit. As I indicated earlier, there's a group of people that look at this, staff-wise, our city engineer, who is a very important part of that review process. You can see at the end of the staff report, on July 13th, 2022, the city engineer approved the application as amended, because there was a few things that we had to tweak and change. This is a little irregular, and I want to point this out to the board. Typically, we will run the process. A project will go to the Community Appearance Board first, and they will get their approval, and then it will come to the P&Z. Due to the nature of the project and the timing of it, we're trying to get this done as quickly as possible. We're bringing this to this board to get your approval on the site plan. And do we have a Community Appearance Board meeting scheduled, Patty, for this?
Not yet.
Okay. We're having a difficult time getting a quorum. We only have 3 members now in our Community Appearance Board. So what we're going to do is we're going to get your approval tonight. We're going to attempt to get a quorum on our Community Appearance Board and get it approved from the CAB. Should there be any changes that will affect the site plan approval from this board, we'll bring it back to this board. I don't foresee that happening with a project such as this, but I just wanted to point it out to the board that we kind of flip-flop the Community Appearance Board and site plan approval due to a couple of reasons. So our recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval of the site plan for the proposed drive-through accessory car wash located at 8101 Astronaut Boulevard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are several attachments to the agenda cover. I won't go over those just for purposes of time, but you can see the aerial, and that is the same aerial that we have put up here on your monitor. Patty, could we advance this one? And this is the actual, there's some, you can just kind of slowly scroll through these, Patty. These are some street level shots of the site that, of the proposed. And again, the ice, it's going to go a little bit north of the, I believe, of the ice vendor. But this just gives you a sense of the driveway cuts. There's a number of them along Astronaut. One more, Patty? Okay. And this is, if you get back behind the property on the southwest corner, you can see there is a driveway back there. So this will be another access point for the property. And again, the proposed facility will be essentially where the blue mansard building is, the ice building. It's essentially where it's going to sit. So, yes. And here is a copy of the site plan. You can see the existing structure down on the bottom of the site with the cross-hatched roof and canopy. And the stormwater, you can see the stormwater will be handled on this site in an existing stormwater swale system. One thing I didn't point out that I think is important is that city code requires that, I believe it's 50% of the processed water gets recycled. It's an attempt for the city to to conserve water, frankly. And so it's a minimum requirement, and I've verified with the applicant that they have a recycling system in place which will be used. So, Mr. Chairman, again, that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to attempt to answer them. I do know the applicant's here, so available to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I see the applicant is here. Do you have anything you'd like to stand up and say to us before we get started? Introduce yourself and where you're from.
Good evening. My name is Paul Ball with Indian Services. I'm here on behalf of Sunshine Gasoline Distributors, represent them, and our company is an engineering firm. And just here, if you have any questions about the site, we'll answer them, anything you can. And if there's, any issues that come up, I'll do my best to reconcile those as well.
Well, just have a seat nearby there and we'll get through the panel here and ask if we have. I'll start on my left and I'll ask, are there any questions, observations, or input? Site plan checklist and the site plan material.
Yes, I have some questions. I noticed on the application, the checklist, not all the blanks were filled out. So how do we know that you really addressed everything on that checklist? There's a non-applicable or whatever. There's several blanks in it. So to me, I don't know if you really looked at it or not because you didn't check all the blanks. So that's one statement. And then I guess there's a car wash right next door. Do we really think we need another car wash there?
Well, I'll take a stab at that one. Our code is not really driven by market demand. Our code is driven by, if you meet these basic requirements, then, and it's a permitted use in the land use district, that's a decision that the property owner can make if it's a viable use at that location. Although I'm not going to say it's not an issue, I will say I will try to refocus the board on the applicable criteria that the code spells out what should be considered when we're looking at a site plan approval.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just editorialize this for a second, Mr. Chairman. I mean, it's becoming an issue with hotels as well. I mean, I'm continuing to hear, do we need more hotels in the city of Cape Canaveral? I hear that on a regular basis. And that's a policy decision. That's a more of a high-level city council policy decision to say, okay, we have enough hotels. We're going to make some changes to our code that they're not allowed anymore. But until that happens, I think it would put the city in a very bad situation if we said, well, we don't think we need any more. So, just
No,
some general
I understand.
thoughts.
I just, thank you, because I wanted to understand that part. I would love to know where they're gonna move the ice machine. It was a long line during hurricane season.
Yeah.
So you feel like you have addressed everything on that checklist?
Everything was applicable to this situation, yes. I mean, some things that are not fit, they didn't really apply to the site plan. Again, this is an existing site, existing sidewalks along the right of way, existing building on site. A lot of improvements are there. If there's any, and I've been in communication with the city planning department, and anything that they've requested is provided.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to have addressed?
No, I'm used to, if it says non-applicable, you at least know that somebody's looked at it. In my 32 years in aerospace, you at least say, I've looked at it or I didn't look at it. You know,
Each box. I'm the same, I'm trained the same way. And, but I looked at that and I had the same reaction to it. But I said, David's looked at this, and if it's applicable, it'll be addressed, and if it's not, it's not. So I trusted him.
I'm good.
Okay. You're next.
Yeah, I have a non-applicable comment
Mr.
to the approval with the fact that one way or the other.
Stephen.
The concerns I had would be the noise generated by the fan system on the car wash itself, and also to the height and what effect it's going to have over the community garden. That's really honestly, that's all I have to say, just an observation, review of the plans and the heights and everything. And that's the only thing I would comment about.
Well, do you have an answer you'd like to get from the applicant?
Not particularly, I just, as a citizen in the community, I'm just taking an opportunity to voice my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, if you will, we did discuss this during the approval process. That was a concern of ours, also was raised. And I think there was a few things that somewhat mitigated our concerns. The first is that we do have a code that addresses off-site noise. So if there is excessive off-site noise to the residents, primarily to the west, that can be addressed by our noise ordinance and our noise code. Also, if you looked at the elevation of the buildings that were included in the agenda packet, you can see that there's no openings or windows or anything like that on the west face wall of the structure. So as opposed to the east side where there are some penetrations in the wall. So we thought that would potentially mute some of the, limit some of the noise coming off the site. Also, I believe that I was told, and maybe the applicant can verify this, but that the units that do generate most of the sound are insulated and noise-proofed to a degree. Obviously, you're going to continue to hear things, but I think there is some noise proofing that was going to be utilized.
Tell us about is there a fence between the property on the west side? Is there a fence on the western border?
There is a fence.
Yes. There's a wooden fence?
That section, I think it's like a chain link fence.
Chain link?
Isn't there a park right behind that fence?
Patriots Park is just to the west of it.
And there is a gate exactly where the ice machine is going into the children's park. I'm wondering how safe that's going to be as far as going back and forth.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that because I'm not sure the arrangement that allows that, because that gate, I believe, accesses onto private property.
I was trying to figure that out because I know there's an entry to the community garden. But
There we
if
go.
you look at the ice machine, It's about 6 foot right opposite, there's a gate going into the toddler's playground. And
Yeah,
that
we have,
struck me.
yes. If you're familiar with the site, the community gardeners do utilize the parking on this property.
Yeah, yeah.
To get, when they're there to use the garden. So I think at this point, the property owner's been certainly been working with us on that, but I think it's private property that we have in parking. That is the reason we are working on a project right now. The city engineer is working on a project to build a small parking lot on the south end of the community garden. Patty, could you go back to that slide that shows that southern entrance? Yeah, that's probably good right there. If just in the southwest, that 90-degree where the west property and the south property lines intersect, right there, just to the kind of the northwest of that, there's a small opening in area that the city engineer is preparing, is putting in a parking lot. The city's going to be building a little parking lot right there. Zach, is it six stalls? Do you remember the number of stalls in there?
I think it was 6, yeah.
So I think the parking issue is going to be resolved with the construction of this parking lot.
I just couldn't tell, there was a grassy area, there's a chain link fence, and there's a grassy area, and I was wondering if that was city property or whether it belonged to the gas station. But when I saw the gate, I'm thinking this is where you're gonna be unpacking 5-year-old, 4-year-old.
Yeah, as Dave said, Patriot Park is expected to be redone with new amenities, including parking. And to your question about the community garden, I think it's further enough north, or south, I should say, of the garden to not be directly in line of sight for significant shade impacts. So it should be okay.
Okay, any other questions along that line? I have one. Stephen, you still have the floor. You have anything else?
We take the input, Dave.
Okay. Dr. Miller, you have the next term? Nothing? Okay. Okay, John?
Yeah, and I'm sure it was kind of addressed. I just want to make sure that I understand completely. In terms of recycling the water, my concern not only is for water supply, but also the wastewater, how that's handled, because, our city services are being taxed in those regards anyway. I want to make sure that what we're doing here doesn't really put us in a bind.
Yes, the car wash will have a reclaim system. There will be 2 1,500-gallon tanks below ground, and downstream from that will be a 750-gallon grease trap or water separator. The car wash system itself will uses, I don't have the exact number with me, but just for example, say uses 20 gallons of water total to wash a car. Roughly 15 gallons of that will be reclaimed water. 5 gallons will be fresh water. So they only use fresh water for the final rinse. So all that water goes into the reclaim system and gets pumped back through equipment and filtered and reused to wash the water. So it's about a 90-95% recycle system. The excess water or emergency discharge is what would go to the community sewer system. And it, of course, once those tanks overflow, that drains into the sanitary sewer line and out and connects with the sewer system in the right of way.
And that's well within, good with that?
And I could provide cut sheets for the exact system and equipment that's being installed in our building plans that I believe have already been submitted to the city. has the equipment list and everything in it, but I could get the actual manufacturer's information and provide it if necessary.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Okay, Nancy, your turn.
Don't have anything else.
All right. Is there anything, city attorney, I'd like to highlight? Okay. And I have no additional comments either. I think good review and good questions. I think the thing that we need to be mindful of is level of service. And that was checked against the sewer and the water. And so I'm going to ask for a motion to recommend approval or disapproval.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve this as stated.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Patty, would you call roll, please?
Mr. Russell,
4.
Mr. Price,
For the motion.
Ms. Jennings,
For the motion.
or
For the motion.
Dr. Miller,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud.
For the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, so we recommend approval of that site plan. Thank you.
Thank you all. I do have one little thing that, and I don't know if it's been corrected or not, at the very bottom of the list where that staff recommends approval, it says Hyatt Hotel, and has a different address on Astronaut Boulevard. If that could be corrected just for the final document.
Thank you. I noticed that too, and I didn't have it in front of me right here.
Yes, I noticed that too. About 20 minutes ago. Yeah, that's
Well, thank you all for your time. Appreciate
understood.
it.
Thank you. And the documentation will be corrected.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to mention one thing. We're talking about water supply, just briefly. An interesting document came across my desk this week. And it was a capacity analysis that a consultant put together for the city. It was about a year ago, but I had just seen it the first time this last week. And it was looking at the capacity of our city wastewater plant. And I'll just boil down about 100 pages to a simple statement. We're permitted for about 1.8 million gallons a day at our wastewater plant. We're currently using about 1.1 MGD, million gallons a day at the plant. So we have a roughly, give or take, 700,000 gallons of capacity. Now, the interesting bit of information was it looked at a 10-year flow record at the city plant. And there really hasn't been that much difference in the last 10 years as far as the annual flow. It did range from roughly 1.1 to, I think there was a high of 1.3 one year, but it's come back down a little bit to a little over 1.1. So we do have extra capacity. The important number is, as I understand it, when the city reaches 80% of its permitted capacity, which is roughly 1.44 million gallons a day. At that point, then we have to start getting serious about what we're going to do out at the plant as far as expanding. So we still have a little bit of room. And if you look at the last 10 years from our historic flows, it really hasn't changed significantly. So if anybody is kind of a nerd and likes to look at that kind of stuff, I'd be happy to email it to you, but it's interesting.
The system also processes the stormwater runoff too, doesn't it?
Well, whatever stormwater, one way or another, gets into our sanitary system, it does. But most stormwater is either discharge out into a pop-off point into our canal, the main canal, drainage canal that runs perpendicular with North Atlantic, or it's handled by on-site retention and detention facilities. The intent would not be to put our storm sewer, storm effluent, or storm flow into the wastewater plant. That would eat up a lot of capacity. We did have some inflow into the wastewater system when we have our hurricanes. We have a lot of like manholes. It'll just the water rises so high and they'll just get into manholes, different places. So it does happen, but typically it doesn't. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's why we continue to check levels of service.
Yes.
All right. We're now ready for the presentation by Emily Horn. And who's going to do that?
Chairman, I'll start it off for us. If anybody doesn't remember, I haven't been up here in a while. My name's Zach. I am the Deputy Community Economic Development Director. His deputy. We dressed alike today on purpose. So we could.
I wish I had
We can
hair.
Well, and I'm also the Sustainability Manager for the city. And we're going to talk about a project tonight that actually Brenda Serpinaut started about a year and a half ago. Brenda is no longer with the city. We now have Kyle Harris, who I was kind of the intermediary between the two, shepherding this project, and we're going to hand it off to Kyle pretty soon, permanently. But this has been a long day coming, and we're very excited to show you what we've come up with today in conjunction with Kimley Horn. So I've just got a little intro to start us off, and then I'll hand it over to Kyle. But just to set us up, the Presidential Streets Master Plan, which you see in your agenda packet, is the culmination of several years' worth of work by city staff and various partners. Of course, we have Kimley Horn, to enhance the overall sustainability and resilience of the city's infrastructure. Within the umbrella of sustainability and resilience, there are many things, of course, but I think tonight what we're going to be talking about the most are two key components of improving resident safety and enhancing the overall local natural environment of the city. The presidential streets represent a sizable area of the community, home to quite literally thousands of residents, pieces of critical infrastructure, and several civic services such as the Broward County Sheriff's Office and the Canaveral Fire Rescue Station number 53. But the area's infrastructure, which I'm sure you're aware, is in general older and in need of repair, modernization, and enhanced resilience. In June of 2021, the City Council unanimously adopted the city's first ever Resiliency Action Plan. I have a copy of it right here, which sets various targets and initiatives for the city to strive towards and implement over the course of a 30-year timeline. The Presidential Streets Master Plan is an offshoot of this Resiliency Action Plan and takes many of the targets laid out in it and focuses them down specifically to the area of the presidential streets. The presidential streets were chosen as an area of focus for future improvements due to several factors, some of which I've already touched on. From a resilience standpoint, several of the streets are prone to urban flooding during rain events. We've tracked and witnessed at least 4 of these such events since June of 2021 with the city's new weather stations and from resident reports. The streets also lack the ability for safe multimodal travel by pedestrians, bicyclists, and automobiles, and others have sections of poor lighting and incomplete sidewalks. From a sustainability standpoint, the area is heavily paved, and some areas have very little foliage and trees. The combination of the two can lead to excess amounts of potentially nutrient and pollutant-rich runoff after a rain event that flows directly to the lagoon, impeding its ecosystem health. As the city continues to ready its infrastructure for 21st century challenges, the Presidential Streets Master Plan and its many recommendations will be critical to improving this vital section of the city over the next 2 decades or so. It is a multi-generational plan that will, when completed, be truly transformational for the city and its residents. And with that, I will hand it to Kyle.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kyle Harris. I am the new senior planner as of July 11th. So I'm kind of picking up where Brenda left off on this project and many others. So you'll be seeing a lot more of me. Just to kind of further introduce what this plan does, there's about over 13 miles of roadway in the presidential street. So we want to be sure that we're prioritizing the right projects, the right streets at the right time. So the plan kind of creates a framework that includes various tools and recommendations that we will reference as we begin work on the streets in the coming years. Not every tool or recommendation in the plan is going to be used. That's something to keep in mind. They give us a lot of options, which you'll see in their presentation. And just because it's in there doesn't necessarily mean it will be what's right for our streets. But they provided us with options so we can kind of tailor what we want to our streets. We actually have a pretty good baseline to work from with our grid-style road network. It makes connectivity really easy, and it provides a good jumping-off point. So it's a primarily residential area. Input from citizens was crucial to the development of this plan, which they're going to go into a little bit more detail. They did a couple, I wasn't here for this, but the citizen engagement sessions. A couple issues that came up again and again: flooding, pedestrian safety and connectivity, roadway design, particularly in what we call the focus area, which is A1A to the beach, and then Harrison Avenue in the north and Pierce to the south. So while we're embarking on this project, I myself am a resident of Cape Canaveral. Part of what I like about it is that it is a small town feel where, you know, it has a strong sense of community. I think that's something that we're going to keep in mind every step of the way. Before we embark on any project, any specific street, we want to get input from the people on that street every step of the way. So that's really important to us. And the first steps that we are undertaking are the surveying of the streets and the community engagement, which we should be starting, you know, relatively soon. And we already have some money budgeted for the surveying, and we are intending to apply for as many grants as we can. Use the CRA funds, but with the grants, it's something that Kimmy Horn can assist us with. So I guess I would like them to now do their presentation. They're going to start, I believe, with the community engagement. They have some background they want to do.
Thank you, and thank you, Zach. Thank you, Kyle. And for the record, I am Kyle Tucker with Kim and Horn Associates. With me tonight is Colleen McGee. Together, we've been, I'll say, the project leads on this project.
Say your name again.
Kelly Tucker.
Kelly,
Yes, sir.
K-E-L-L-Y.
Eli. Last name is Klepper. K-L-E-P-P-E-R.
Okay, and your associate?
Colleen McGee.
Say again.
Colleen McGee.
Colleen.
Colleen, MC capital B.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So as Kyle was mentioning, you know, there was an extensive community outreach effort as part of this process. And this is not something that we took lightly. And when I say that there was an extensive engagement component, not only did we have 2 community workshops that were publicly announced and, you know, held locally, we did one here in these chambers. We also held one across the street at the library. We also had an online survey that we did twice. Once for the initial, and then we also opened it up again so that additional comments could be received from those that had missed the opportunity, or also just to be able to provide additional comments as the recommendations were being rolled out. And then also there was the online portion when we had one of our workshops. So those folks that could not attend in person had the ability to watch sitting at home, sitting wherever, and providing their comments in real time, being tracked as far as some of the recommendations and some of those comments that were provided. And then, of course, there was a pretty extensive mail-out the city did as part of a lot of their mail-out components, inviting residents, visitors, whoever, to provide comments in writing, which we did receive quite a bit. And Colleen's got the numbers, so when I say we had a pretty good turnout, I think we had almost 700 respondents during the course of this process. And there again, this has been ongoing comments that we've received since day one up until, we actually did cut it off about 45 days ago so that we could kind of finalize. One of the things that we did was we listened. It's like Kyle and Zach said, we listened. And as part of that, we came up with a series of recommendations, and those are actually distributed back in section 3 of the master plan. And when we start looking at that, those recommendations are kind of based off of some overarching visions. There's a series of statement goals. So those broader based, what do we want to try to achieve? A framework plan toolkit, and there's a sub-portion that Colleen's going to be reviewing. And then also recommendations for specific improvements. couple of things that you'll see as you're reading those pages, and if you're following along, back in pages 42 through 47, or excuse me, 46, what we're identifying are the ability to create, and the recommendations to create great streets, great connected spaces for people to be able to go from point A to point B, and what's at the end of those trip ins. We also identified those items that would help create a great place to live. And that was just one component of the recommendations and those overarching, I don't call it the vision statements themselves. We start looking at, we also took an approach that what we determined to be equitable, environmentally sustainable. So really looking at the resiliency, looking at not only stormwater improvements, but also the beach ends. We heard that was a big item. Looking at the built environment, and then also creating an accessible environment for all users. It's not just people that can walk and ride, it's those people that need those additional accommodations. And then lastly, it's about creating that connected, efficient, multimodal transportation network, and that's a big thing. Walk, bike, ride, longboard, golf cart, and all of those items be able to go throughout the residential streets. Colleen's going to talk a little bit about the recommendations, and a couple of things I want you to keep in mind as she's going through this. The recommendations, even though some of them are, I'll say, street or area specific, we specifically identify those that they could be portable to other streets. But just because something is identified for Fillmore doesn't mean that it's not applicable in other streets. That gives the city council and the city as a whole the opportunity to say, we want this, but in this location. All of these recommendations are built under that premise. Colleen?
Thank you very much, Kelly. So on page 48 of your document, and we talk about the framework plan toolkit. And so what we did was we used all that feedback and the information we gathered from the workshops and from the community through those surveys. And we put together this toolkit. It's a menu of different types of recommendations that, like Kelly said, are portable to streets throughout the presidential streets area. So there are 8 different types: pedestrian improvements, roadway improvements, intersection and crossing improvements, traffic calming tools, which was something that really came up a lot in our conversations with the community, place-making design improvements, beach ends. As Kelly mentioned, we took a focus on the beach ends, stormwater improvements, and resiliency improvements. And we developed planning level cost estimates for these different types of improvements so that the city can use this as they're programming these projects into their capital improvements plan and their budget in the coming years. These cost estimates are available on pages 77 through 79, and then at the end. And so as Kelly mentioned, that framework plan toolkit is portable, and we really focused in on specific focus areas for recommendations. There were 5 locations that we took a close look at that you'll see in the document on page 62. There's a nice map that shows there are 3 intersections we looked at. We looked at Ridgewood Avenue and Fillmore Avenue. So page 62.
Okay, go ahead.
So 3 different intersections. We wanted to look at one that was on Ridgewood, one that was on North Atlantic, and then one that was within the neighborhood, within Presidential Street area. So we looked at North Atlantic and Tyler Avenue and Magnolia Avenue at Tyler Avenue, in addition to that Ridgewood and Fillmore intersection. We also looked at 2 corridors.
Well, now,
and-
hang on just a second.
Yes, sir.
You'd back up, you would, these 4 delineated areas on page,
Page
I
62.
can't find there it is, 62.
Mhm.
Are these the first, will these be the first,
Not necessarily.
projects?
Great question. These were areas that came up a lot in our community engagement. And so we saw, I think Kelly mentioned we had a map as part of one of the surveys where people were putting points on the map and, different issues or ideas that they have for the area. And so these locations popped up a lot on that map. And that was why we decided to focus on them. However, the recommendations we're making for these 5 focus areas are portable to any of the presidential streets. And so that was something that was really important as we worked on developing these concepts, that they be something that could be implemented in other locations throughout the area. So they will not necessarily be implemented first, but, you know, we certainly have a good framework to work with. The city and the council is working on deciding what's coming next and when. So for the 2 corridors, we wanted to look at one that was east-west and one that was north-south. There were a lot of comments that came up about Fillmore Avenue, both within our discussions with the community and with city staff. And Poinsettia is a north-south street that extends throughout the project area, and there were a lot of traffic calming concerns about Poinsettia, and so that's why we took a close look at that one. For the purposes of tonight and our limited time together, I want to focus on Fillmore Avenue because we really took a deep dive into our what this corridor could look like. And we developed multiple recommendations for Fillmore. 2 different options, if you will. So the first is a 2-way option. So maintaining Fillmore 2-way traffic as it is today, 10-foot drive aisles with bicycles sharing the roadway. A crosswalk, having crosswalks with potential in-pavement lighting to really draw attention to pedestrians as they're walking across the street. And this is on page 66. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. 6-foot sidewalks on both sides of the roadway, which is ADA accessible. The possibility of adding shade trees in rain gardens to help capture some of the stormwater that's collecting in these areas, and also providing shade for people so that they can comfortably walk along the corridor. The option for a raised intersection with a mural at the intersection of Ridgewood and Fillmore, because this was an intersection that came up. There's some issues with visibility and turning movements on at that particular intersection. And then also looking at adding some additional beach parking at the beach end, and bicycle parking, benches and shade trees and beach access. So that's the 2-way option. While we were looking at Fillmore in discussions with city staff, it was important that we also look at what could Fillmore look like if it was a 1-way street and we had more space while there would only be 1 drive aisle, there would be more space for pedestrians, more space for bicyclists, and also more space, more green space, more places for stormwater to infiltrate into the environment and not just stand on the water. And so we looked at a 10-foot drive aisle that would be eastbound. Of course, this would have to be matched with a 1-way pair. And a 2-way bicycle boulevard with 4-foot bicycle lanes. Same ideas with the crosswalks and wider sidewalks, but for the trees, really looking at rain garden bulb outs and pervious curb, and what can we really do to help the stormwater filter in this part of presidential streets where we have a lot of issues with that. And so we put this out to the community through the survey and in our second community workshop. And there was mixed feelings about both options. Some people really wanted to see that 2-way street, maintain it 2 ways, and then others were more interested in the possibilities that could be achieved with 1-way. So I just wanted to bring that to your all's attention. That is something, as I mentioned, that could be portable to other streets throughout the Presidential Streets Network. And looking at 1-way streets will really you have to do them in pairs in order to maintain traffic the way it is today. But there's a lot that we can do within that limited right-of-way within the street.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question for Colleen, if you don't mind. Colleen, if we go back to the 2-way
Yes.
option, and you said that the bicycles would be sharing the road with the cars.
Yes.
Would there be a bike lane marked in that or no?
Well, if you look at the concept on page 68, you'll see that there is space for a marked bicycle lane. You'll see, there's figure 15, concept Fillmore Ave, option 1. There would be a, let's see, I believe it was a four-foot bicycle lane.
Yeah, I
there.
see that now. Thank you. Yeah.
And so they would be sharing the roadway with cars, but they would be in a designated
Okay.
space.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So which option, which configuration gives you the best way to soak up excessive water for the stormwater overflow, the flooding? Does a one-way street give you more area to take, to absorb water?
Indeed, it does.
That would be, yeah, that'd be what would flip it in my mind. You got to get that water in the ground, so we got to catch it somewhere. So you need somewhere to build large catch areas, percolate it.
That part of the city, as you all know, is very permeable. I mean, it's very, the perk rates are probably the highest in the city in that area. It's very sandy, and so it would really potentially be a huge help in dealing with stormwater in that area.
So I didn't see that highlighted in the study here, where, you know, that is a major criteria, flood control. And which, where can you do it? Where you need room to do it? And and which option gives you the most room, one-way street or two-way street? Is that tabulated anywhere, or do all of us just have to figure that out by ourselves?
There are ways that could be achieved with two-way, but not as much surface area. And so I think you're correct to point that out there.
Yeah.
That's something that we can make a better point of presenting.
Yeah.
Discussing.
And I will say that about 6 months ago, the city hired a consultant who prepared I'll call it the Presidential Streets Drainage Basin Study, if you recall that. In that study, the consultant looked at this exact issue. If there was additional green space on our streets in the presidential area, how much additional stormwater that could treat. That analysis has been done, although it's not part of this specific study, that information is there. And, you know, given, I think what we're really looking for are some general policy thoughts from the board. I think if the recommendation is, yeah, let's take a look at one ways. I think we would further dig into issues like we're discussing right now, and we could present more breadth and depth of data and information for the board to consider.
Yeah, we understand. We're here to listen to the overall data set. We're invited to make passing comment. But that passing comment about the flood control, that needs to be, the solutions need to be compiled. City council is not gonna go, they've got enough to do. They're not gonna go fly through all those reports. They've got you and us to help them. All I'm saying is we need to put that story together in one place instead of having to find it in this report, which is a very good report, by the way, and the resiliency report, stormwater water report. You gotta go read a lot of stuff to get the answer. Oh, well, that's what we do. We do research.
That's a great point, and I think there may be an opportunity for us to sift through that drainage basin study and maybe pull out some salient items and data, and maybe look for an opportunity to plop it down in the master plan that we're covering. And it's a very good point.
I think too, Dave, once the plan gets more on a phase of implementation, a street-by-street basis, that's where you'll be able to also showcase on a street-by-street level the amount of impervious surface you could remove and feasibly put in with pervious surfaces to get a stormwater calculation. Because it will change from street to street, and not every street will require as much or more of the impervious, or excuse me, the permeable surfaces. It's all about just returning the city to the older system of what it could handle before so much development was put in place with so much paving. So that would be addressed for sure. It's a good comment.
The last thing I
Move
wanted
on.
to mention, talking about the action plan and implementation, which Kyle touched on. This plan is going to be implemented in phases over 25 years, most likely. We have short-term improvements identified, we have midterm improvements identified, and long-term improvements identified. On page 81 and 82, we have identified the top 16, because we wanted to use a nice round number, top 16 projects that will really make a big difference on stormwater and safety. And you'll see that list here. They're organized into 3 different tiers. But this, when, Mr. Chairman, you were asking about which projects are we doing first? Is it going to be these 5? I would say we're going to start with this 16 project list and, work from there. This was something that we vetted closely with staff. And based on a lot of the issues they're seeing out there today, these were some of the locations that popped up as very high priority. So there's a corresponding map on page 82 that shows where these projects are all located. And so this is really intended to be the city's roadmap for how are we going to improve presidential streets and make them better, more resilient, and safer. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to staff and to you all to ask more questions and have discussion. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a very good roundup of the prioritization of the improved. Good work. What was that?
Thank you, Colleen and Kelly. So, this is a beast of a report. There's no doubt about that. We know in all likelihood it will be skimmed. But there are a lot of good recommendations in here that from now, I guess, we will take to the city council and begin implementing as feasible and appropriate. But Kyle, do you have anything else, Dan? Very good. Dave, you got anything?
Any questions?
I've got one thing to add, and I'll promise I'll be done. Is that I think the intent here is for us to have a kind of, as Kelly and Pauline both said, let's come up with some concepts and ideas that can be transferable in and amongst all of our presidential streets. And we will come up with a system that prioritizes what streets. Let's say Polk Avenue is the biggest need of immediate attention due to the decaying of infrastructure or whatever the criteria end up being. So, as those priorities are identified, we would start planning for those improvements in our capital improvement plan. So they would be funded depending on the prioritization. So, and we could spend a lot of money redoing a street, millions of dollars. So it's going to be, thank goodness the majority of this area is within the city's community redevelopment agency, our CRA, which is a great funding mechanism for projects like we're discussing this evening. But there's still a lot of work to do. I think we're really right now, we're trying to get the concepts and into place. And then the real work starts is prioritizing and knocking the streets off. Each year, the concepts here are 30,000-foot concepts. Each year, as we bring a street off and we're going to start working on that specific street, we'll do site-specific surveying, we'll do engineering, site-specific engineering of that street. And that level of detail of information is not in this plan. But that will be something that we do year to year, depending on the street and the project.
I will add too that the improvements that we envision don't just extend to the surface level. if there's any underground utilities and there's a chance to redo those and upgrade them as needed, that would be done as well. And the city of Cocoa, who's our potable water utility, is very interested and involved in this project as well. I imagine FPL would too, as our electrical utility provider. Just a note about funding. Kimley Horn was nice enough to add an appendix related to specifically grants. I think they identified over 70 grants that could be made available to us for a project like this, which is amazing. And now we do have a full-time grant writer, which is awesome. So that will definitely be explored as much as we can to pay for these improvements as they come along. I don't think I have anything else. Anybody else have any questions? I'm happy to try and answer them.
So I'll look to my right and see if they.
No, I don't think so. It's pretty remarkable, though. You guys did a really good job.
I have a comment. First of all, you did a great job. Thank you so much. My comment is directed more toward the city. And that is, I think this is a great project and I'm really looking forward to it, really excited about it. But let's not forget about the west side of A1A and what needs to be done over there too. I know that we can't do it all at once, but that's in my mind, that's something that we need to take a look at as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Like a response?
No, you don't have to. You don't have to respond. Just go forth and do good. To my left, go back to. Susan, do you have any comment?
Oh, I thought we were going down the line. No,
Well,
I thought it was a fabulous report. I really liked all your prioritizations, the short-term, midterm, long-term. I was actually at the first meeting, community meeting, and I thought that was well facilitated, and you did a fabulous job there as well. I think a lot of people came out, and your little dots on the map to really identify, you know, a lot of people there, their flooding problems and whatever. I think you did a good job getting everybody's input. I love the different concepts and to be able to apply them. You know, we got to eat the elephant one bite at a time, and you guys have gave some good tools to get there.
Thank you.
One thing I would have to ask of the city is for the group decides if they want to turn the street one way, I would ask of the city to go to that street and make sure that the people that reside on that street permanently are on board with turning it to a one-way street. I would not want to see that decision made at any level in the city without people on that street agreeing to have that done. Hate for them to wake up one morning and then find out that they don't operate the way they've operated in the past. We got a lot of streets that we can bicycle down, and a lot of streets that we can put sidewalks on and create spaces for people to safely move around. But I would ask the city to please make sure the people on those streets involved and to check them in first. No, I've got one other comment. When I hear raised intersection, the first thing that pops into my mind is the surveys, and there's a whole slew of the ADA codes that come into play when we start tinkering with sidewalks and streets and rises in streets and such. And I'm sure that's going to be part of this process as we go down the road. And one other thing is, it was an awesome report. I actually read every page of it, front and back. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I've got.
Yeah, I agree. It's an awesome report. As Zach said, it's a beast. And it's a very good collection of all the things we need to look at. I read it. I read all of it myself. Okay, Michael, what do you have to add to it?
I just have to say, I thought it was a wonderful plan. I found myself getting excited when I was reading some of the ideas. And I agree that the flooding has got to be addressed. But we talk a lot about keeping our city a small town. And I like that we can keep it small town, but make it much nicer than what it looks like. I like your ideas. I like the priorities.
Yeah, this is an opportunity to go in and make a lot of, and improve those areas that need it in the residential streets area. I've noticed over the years, there are spots of improvement as far as the building and the maintenance and upkeep's concerned. Just little spots of goodness popping up all over the area. And this sort of effort, this sort of master plan will stimulate and increase that. Okay, I thought about one-way streets, and Stephen had it right. The people on that street have got to buy in. And the way to encourage their buy-in for a one-way application is to educate on stormwater. If they've got a bad stormwater or bad flooding problem or bad spots, it should be an easy sell. Show them how the one-way and the stormwater collection would improve with one-way application. But like Stephen said, got to sell to people, got to inform them, get them that buy-in, and get it done that way. Well, I just winded up then with, it's a great report. I read it. Took me 3 days, 3 afternoons to do it. And I think I drove my wife crazy. Well, I'm a data junkie, so I got into some of the data. I drove my wife crazy with some of the questions and observations. But she likes to stay informed about what's going on around town too. All right. Good job. Good report. Our job is to keep working this information, using it, and we'll do some good things if we follow this roadmap.
Mr. Chairman, it's the board's, with the board's discretion, we can, I know that we're going to make some changes based on some of your comments specifically about the stormwater numbers that are included in other studies. We'll look for opportunities to seed those into this study. Does the board, I mean, at some point, we would like to have a recommendation from the board so we could present it to the council. I'm not saying that recommendation has to be this evening. If the board is ready to do that, that would be fine. But if the board wants to have another month, reread it, at some point, Mr. Chairman, we'll be asking the board to make a recommendation on the study, and we'd like to advance it to the city council when it's ready.
I'm looking back. Was there a request?
They were asking us for, provide staff with direction.
Right. I highlighted that somewhere and then I lost it in my paper. Yeah, here it is. Staff direction. I think, well, let's talk about that. What kind of immediate directions would be good for us to entertain and go forward with?
Well, the only thing I heard this evening was the discussion on the stormwater numbers. We can certainly, we'll address that. I personally didn't hear anything other than that the board is specifically recommending that needs to be changed or revised. But if the board would like to.
I have one more thing. The study involving two-way and one-way pairs, maybe offer, some pretty strong recommendations in terms of what would be overall most beneficial for the development there. I don't know.
Well, I think the most, I think street improvement would be the first elephant to attack. Go hunt that elephant down and slay that animal and fix the street. I mean, if we ever get our street and stormwater situation manageable, then we can do all those other things.
Is there, maybe you don't know the answer to this question, but is there any numbers associated with the volume of traffic on a two-way as opposed to one-way? Is one-way reduced traffic or?
It would be not necessarily.
Okay.
Now, there are, we did discuss this a lot with Brenda, about the pros and cons of one-way streets. So the pro, clearly, stormwater improvements and, more space for other modes of travel beyond the car. There are some cons to a one-way, which, was already mentioned here tonight. People are used to traffic patterns the way they are. And when you start to change streets to one-way, that shifts traffic patterns throughout the entire presidential streets area. And you might notice more traffic, you might notice people driving faster because there aren't fewer conflict points. This is a psychological thing as human beings. When we are on a two-way street and you have oncoming cars coming towards you, you drive a little bit slower because of that friction. When you have a one-way street, people tend to drive a little more quickly. And so that might kind of be at odds with some of the traffic calming desires that we would have in the community.
But
So,
you had kind of addressed that with speed humps and that kind of stuff anyway, right?
yes, we could. And, as many intersections as you have on your streets, and as narrow as they are, I don't think it would be as much of an issue in presidential streets as it is in some other places. That we live in. So I didn't answer your question, but
Yeah.
I gave you some
It's
pros and
probably
cons.
not, it was more of a theoretical question anyway. There's a lot of work has to be done to answer those questions, to implement those corrections. And this, you're asking for staff direction to go do something. I guess I was thinking your department would put in front of you and the city manager would put in front of the council the next steps out of this report to attack. Why? What is it you need from us?
Well, the next step, as I understand it, would be to present this master plan to the city council and get them to, I'll say, ratify it. I mean, if Anthony wants to jump in, that's fine. I don't think we're going to adopt it by an ordinance or a resolution. I think we'll, very much like we did with the resiliency plan and some of the other plans that we recently adopted. I believe the council ratified those.
They adopted that, yeah.
They adopted it. So we'll be asking the council to do something very similar. So what we would like to do is in our agenda cover that we will present with the master plan to the council. Obviously, I would love to have a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Board because they do look to this board to, as Lamar, as you say, to do their homework for them on land use issues. And this very much is a land use document and a policy document. So we'd like at some point when the board is ready to have a recommendation to the city council on this plan.
Well, let's do it this way. We can vote tonight to endorse this plan. We like it, we approve of it, we applaud the data that's gathered, tremendous effort, and now it needs to be implemented. There's so much of it, you've got to pick the shot. You got to direct it, governed by funding.
Yes.
So that's the city manager's job. Yours and the city manager has got to sit down and figure out, okay, we want to go after these streets. Where's that funding at? And you got to spot that incoming funding. Then what would you need from us to push it? You wouldn't need much of anything.
No.
You've already got the plan.
Yes. I think once you make your recommendation on this plan, I think the P and Z to a large degree is out of the picture, so to speak, regarding the plan. I think at that point, it starts to become more of a policy document that the council is going to have to wrestle with. And then once they adopt it, then it becomes a yearly part of the budget process on funding the improvements that are spelled out in this document. So the council will be wrestling with this every year as they make budgetary decisions on implementing the study in competition with all of our other needs in the city.
No, we'd be glad to have anybody suppose you decided to make Fillmore a one-way street. Please don't make that fact out of the building tonight, but let's say you decided to do that. If you did, you'd want buy-in from that community. We would be open to hearing what the community has to say. They could come in here, just say what they want to say, and express their opinion. We can collect that data in this board. We can help that way.
Yeah, I can assure you that we are not going to make some decisions on one-waying any street in the city behind closed doors
Right.
and, you know, in a dark room somewhere.
Open process.
It will be a very public process. There'll be ample opportunity for people to comment on it, the public. And frankly, we haven't even, you know, that will be a part of the implementation program of this plan. I have worked in areas where it requires you know, I'll call it a mini referendum of property owners along a street before an action like that would happen. And there has to be whatever the number is, 51% or 75%. So those are all things that we haven't got down to that detail yet, but there will be some process that's put in place when we're making those decisions.
So we'd be glad to hear what the public's got to say and relate that for the council and make recommendations. But the city already has a great tool, you know, you got that public involvement tool where you put the dots down, you allocated money and all those tools for the public came in, made known their desires. Well, now you could narrow down that to a street community.
That's right.
Use that same technique. And you wouldn't need to have the P and Z board hold here, you just get it right there, right at you in one application of that community and management tool. Well, anyway, we got lots of ways to approach it. What we need to do then is endorse the plan. Is it in keeping tonight to go ahead and give you a motion of endorsement for this total master plan?
If the board is so inclined, that would be great. If you're not ready to do that, let me
Okay.
know what we need to change and we'll come back and.
All right, well, okay, let me go to the Mariah. What do you think about it?
Well, I think we have two choices, and we can either recommend that staff provide the city council, or we could request perhaps that they reinforce the benefits of stormwater by doing certain actions. I mean, I think that's where we are, aren't we?
Well, rather than picking specific actions and directions, presentations, that's what we're asking for tonight is, are you ready to endorse a total plan?
Yes, I think.
The council, we're for it. Tell us how you want us to help.
Well, as I said, what I heard tonight, is some folks are saying maybe we want to beef up certain areas, and if that's the case, we were gonna maybe have to make some editorial or just change it. Now, is that important to some folks, that they want that in before it goes to the city council? That's one option.
That's the decision for, I mean, we have in the past had these discussions, and I get a sense of what the consensus on the board is, and I think I know what it is regarding stormwater in this case. We can make those changes
I think that
without bringing it
reading
back.
it is kind of evident to me that certain things, everything is geared toward the stormwater, and certain things are gonna be beneficial if you went in a certain way. So I would have no problem recommending that if staff presented it to the city council.
Okay, then we can have a motion to something to the effect that we strongly endorse the overall master plan for the presidential streets with emphasis on stormwater improvement. With emphasis on stormwater improvement. Help me out here.
Yeah, I
In the
think
right places.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll go into the plan and we'll look for locations where we can beef up some of the data on the stormwater. And we can maybe add some hard numbers and science into the master plan document dealing with stormwater, infiltration rates and gallons and all of that kind of stuff. Well,
We should do that. You already know the get data. All we're saying is, and you've got stormwater addressed. We just say, we endorse the total plan, and we'd like you to emphasize stormwater improvement.
all right.
Something to that effect. Okay, well then I'll put the motion on the floor and you can decide with it, chew on it. So, we move that the Planning and Zoning Board endorses the residential streets master plan. And we would, like to recommend emphasis on stormwater improvement.
Mr. Chairman, I second that.
Okay, did you get that, Ted? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. You want to chew on it some more, improve it, add to it, whatever. All right, we have a motion and a second. I don't hear anybody wants to talk about it anymore.
I do. I just want to say one little thing. Yeah, this is a major undertaking that we're doing. And I agree with what Dave said. It's our job to do the homework for the city council. And I would feel a little more comfortable if we had a little bit more discussion before we voted. Only because I don't think we're all, any of us are against it. I would just like to have a little bit more information before I voted on it. A little bit more discussion. We talked about stormwater. Maybe give us a month or so to think it over. Maybe there's something else in there we haven't thought of. Because once we do this, this is a major undertaking for the council. I mean, we're changing the city forever. And I'm not saying that I didn't like any of it. That's not true. I just feel like when you're doing your homework, you don't rush into it. And I just feel rushed. But if we want to vote tonight, we'll go ahead and vote. I just want to throw that out there. The major thing, and we've only discussed it one.
Well, that's very wise. And I'm willing to withdraw the motion, and we can just, I'll withdraw the motion. Who seconded?
I did, that's fine. I second the motion.
What I do?
Well, you can withdraw the motion provided there's unanimous consent because it was seconded, so the motion belongs to the body at the moment.
Yeah, I was going next to that second. So, yeah. Tell us how to do it, and we'll do it. We'll withdraw it.
There are no objections from the board.
I have no objection.
I have no objection.
No objections.
No objections.
Thank you. Okay. It's withdrawn. We pulled it back. We have wise counsel that we want to take some longer time to think about this. And we'll depend on Dave to put us an agenda item in front of us at the appropriate time, and we'll come back to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would also ask if any of the board members, as you're chewing on this over the next month or a couple of weeks to 3 weeks, if you do have specific thoughts or comments, please let us know as soon as possible so we can address those and make any changes that are necessary.
So you're encouraging us to send you individual e-notes.
Yes, don't send,
Okay.
don't have offline communication amongst yourselves. You'll get in trouble
Right.
doing that.
Right.
Anthony might jump out of his chair.
Well, individuals can send you
Yes.
an e-note, so that's what we're talking about. All right.
One more thing. So I haven't figured out if there's an action. Were you going to do like a pros and cons for one-way versus two-way that includes stormwater things? So it'd be a little bit more information for people to understand.
You had mentioned that there was discussion of the one-way, and there were people for or against it. Do you ever feel that there were more people for it or more people against it?
Honestly, it was evenly split. And so that's something we can discuss about how we show that. I think, having a pro and con makes a lot of sense. That's something.
Well, I think it's going to be needed to sell it to the people on the street. So I think it's a good idea to just go ahead and do it. And then you're hearing it so that we can back you up.
Well, there is that information. However, I want to say that there is some protection against sunshine rules on critical city infrastructure as far as us distributing that information out to the public.
And I look at stormwater plans every day on projects I'm doing.
Yes.
And so we would get slices of it. And of course, for instance, we're looking at this plan tonight, it was just a slice of what's there. I would be kind of interested to see what the real problems are on the present interest rates.
I think a lot of that information is going to be in that Basin study that the consultant did for us a few months ago. It's packed with that kind of information. It's great. I'll make sure you get a copy of it.
I would very much like the ability to walk up to a set of plans if I have to do it in-house and actually be able to see what is going on with our stormwater system and see if we've got 24-inch tied into 8-inch, blah, blah. Those are things that interest me.
I believe all that information is in the Basin study.
Very
Yes.
good.
I'll get it to you tomorrow. Actually, I'll send it to the entire board in case you're interested. If that's not what you're looking for, let me know and we'll take it the next step.
Personally, I would like to see that, I'd like to see all the stuff that's in the city.
Yep. Well, I've been very woefully disappointed on as-builts and information on our infrastructure. It's not great. I'll just put it that way.
I'll reframe until I see.
Yeah, we're quickly trying to rectify that, but it's,
Yeah, I will say real quick, we did just put in for a grant with the state to update our stormwater map, or the infrastructure of the map to a GIS platform, geographic information software, which it currently is not, to be honest with you. So very exciting. Can't wait to have that. It'll make things much easier, especially requests like that. So hopefully in the next 18 months or so or less, we will be able to do that with relative ease. We have been able to do that successfully with reclaimed infrastructure. That's very exciting.
You're actually gonna need that data before you can actually do any construction.
Oh, absolutely.
Start filtering these pipes in the right direction and upside.
Absolutely. We have that. It just might be on a piece of paper. Instead of on a
Okay,
file.
so can we leave it this way then? If you're gonna send out a lot of information, don't send it to me. I don't want to research that because I know people like Steve will do it.
all right.
You will do it. It'll get done by the right people. I don't want to do it. I will try to be your quarterback, to try to get our business done.
I'll send it to Steve.
Yeah, and give him anything he wants and let him dive as deep as he wishes and he'll be a good resource for us.
At our next meeting, we can have more stormwater specific staff here as well to address any of those comments from Capital Projects Department.
Yeah, good point.
Deputy.
Good point that we have to do.
But sending individual e-notes to you it's good. It's
Great.
good. Any of you want to do that, feel free. Let's see. Anything else on this subject before we move on?
Not on this item. Sure.
All right. And then to my right and left, look for a hold up. We're ready to move on? Okay. Thumbs up. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll-
Thank you.
We'll see you around the hood. All right. And that gets us to the mixed use discussion. Here. All right, we'll move into, when you're ready, Dave, just lead us through it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really going to be conceptual discussion here. At the end of the discussion, I would like some direction on this item as well from the board regarding moving forward. I'm going to try to break this down to be very simple. Mixed use is a concept in land planning that's caught fire for a number of years. In the agenda cover, I spell out a number of benefits of mixed use. And it ties in very closely with what we're talking about as far as resiliency and sustainability for a community. And some of the specifics are spelled out in here. There's two documents that really drive land use decisions in the city. It's our comprehensive plan, which is very much a policy document, policy statements. And then we have what's called our land development code, our zoning code, and a number of other codes. You've got the comprehensive plan, and you've got our land development code.